Farmer John here with a look at Farming Simulator 2018, and today we're taking the old tractor out in the fields and, oh wait, this is the wrong game.
And we consume without purpose. And we consume without reason. And we consume without regard for one another. We consume all.
Now that we've properly set the stage, let's talk about Far Cry 5. Earlier this week we examined the impressive visuals made possible by the latest iteration of the Dunia engine, while also looking at the PlayStation 4 version of the game. This time, however, we're here to discuss the Xbox version in all its glory. So if you're wondering what improvements you can expect on the Xbox One X over PS4 Pro, or how the original Xbox One stacks up, we'll have answers to those questions and more. Ready to dive in? Let's get started. As a large-scale open-world game, Far Cry 5 is one of those titles which benefits greatly from an increased resolution, and in our video last week we established that the game operates at 2880 by 1620 on the PlayStation 4 Pro, while targeting a native 1080p on the base PS4. It's certainly nothing to scoff at, mind you, but we can do better, right? Which brings us to the Xbox One X. In an unexpected move, Best Buy of all places listed the game as operating at 1800p. That strangely specific information isn't exactly what you'd expect to find on a big box retail chain's website, and after playing it myself, it quickly became evident that it isn't quite right. Is it possible that Far Cry 5 delivers a full native 4K on the Xbox One X? The answer lies before you. Yes, after numerous pixel counts, we've determined that Far Cry 5 delivers a full native 2160p presentation on Xbox One X. An impressive feat indeed, which helps elevate the presentation over that of the PS4 Pro. The additional clarity offered by the higher resolution allows players to see objects in the distance more clearly, which has benefits both in terms of presentation and gameplay. In fact, when you take into consideration the top-notch temporal anti-aliasing solution in use here, Far Cry 5 might just stand as one of the finest examples of great image quality on Xbox One X yet. There is effectively no aliasing across most edges throughout the game. This same temporal anti-aliasing produces great results in the PS4 Pro as well, of course, but it is blurrier overall compared to the X. So how about the original Xbox One then? Not unsurprisingly, our pixel count suggests that Far Cry 5 operates at the same 1440 by 1080 that we saw in Far Cry 4. Thanks once again to the TAA, however, it still manages to offer a very clean image quality on the older Xbox hardware, which is an important thing to consider here because no matter which platform you're playing on, Far Cry 5 manages to offer excellent image quality. It's an impressive showing from Ubisoft, that's for sure. If, like myself then, you have access to all 4 consoles and are trying to decide which version to go with, I would definitely suggest the Xbox One X version, especially for owners of 4K televisions. It's rare to find such a large-scale open-world game operating at native 4K on a console, but here it is. While testing the game, I lined up a series of shots designed to compare the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X versions of the game, and the findings are slightly unexpected. By that I mean there are basically no visible differences in terms of details. Object pop-in occurs at exactly the same distance from the player on both systems. Texture filtering is similarly mediocre across every console version, especially when looking far off down the road. This scene highlights a rather strange issue that I did encounter on Xbox One X, however. If you look down the road surface here, you'll notice a strange texture glitch that appears specifically on this version of the game. Thankfully, this is the only spot that I noticed the glitch pop up, but it was very strange nonetheless. Terrain displacement decals pop up at the same point as well, with extra detail appearing along gravel and dirt pathways during locomotion. Still, examining the two side by side does at least demonstrate the improvement in image quality made possible on Xbox One X. This scene really helps you appreciate the extra visible detail you get at native 4K. Look at the signs here in the distance. You can certainly make out the text on the PS4 Pro side, but on Xbox One X they appear much sharper and clearer. Details like this are simply more legible and easier to see at a distance. Another major advantage in favor of the Xbox One X are the loading times. When installed to the default internal drives on both consoles, the X version manages to pull ahead of the Pro throughout each test. It's especially useful when taking advantage of the game's fast travel feature. Now, it's true that both versions share the same basic assets, but the higher resolution on Xbox One X allows the viewer to more easily appreciate fine detail present in the texture work. In creating Far Cry 5, Ubisoft has done an exceptional job on texture and material quality. Buildings, for instance, feature richly textured wooden facades complete with visible splintering and cracking along the paint. Walls of stone feature added geometric detail to enhance the realism of the high-resolution texture work applied across its surface. Dirt and gravel is so realistic at times that you might just mistake it for a real photograph from a distance. This also raises another interesting aspect of the terrain system. Far Cry 5 features a large selection of terrain displacement decals designed to bring extra depth to such surfaces, and it's very effective. It's cheaper to use than tessellation, but it achieves similar results. Terrain blending is also used to more realistically situate trees into the environment. Roots naturally connect with the rolling terrain, increasing realism across the board, especially in forest environments. Speaking of trees, the textures applied to the tree trunks are also a startlingly realistic display of how great materials can help increase immersion. I mean, just look at the detail here. Man-made structures are equally well textured, shaded, and lit. They all blend very naturally into the scenery.
Sweet land of liberty, of the
in fact, when all of these elements, including lighting, texturing, shading, and modeling, all come together, the results can be extraordinary. Far Cry 5 is a gorgeous game and a clear step above Far Cry 4. One amusing thing I had to mention though is, well, this. Taking a page from 2012's Syndicate, this particular church exhibited some rather overdone bloom. And if you run across this with HDR enabled, be ready to put on some sunglasses. So at this point then, we've established that Far Cry 5 is a gorgeous game, but we've also determined the correct ordering in terms of visual quality between the consoles. The base Xbox One sits all the way at the bottom, followed by the PS4 Amateur, with the PS4 Pro situated directly above that, while the Xbox One X rests firmly in the top spot. Which brings us to performance. With such variation in resolution between them, can we also expect similar differences in frame rate? Well, to begin with, all 4 versions are capped at 30 frames per second. Now in our last video, we established that the PS4 Pro offers a stable 30 frames per second experience with an occasional torn frame here or there. Even when under fire though, you can generally expect a very stable frame rate, which is key in a game like this. Oh, and for those complaining about 30 frames per second, let's just remember Far Cry 3 on last generation consoles. Yeah, we've come a long way. What I did not cover last time, however, was base PS4 performance, so I wanted to include a short test using this console. The results are remarkably comparable to the PS4 Pro. In fact, this scene tackling the Seed Ranch in a chaotic, non-stealth fashion shows a very stable level of performance, just like its bigger brother. Far Cry 4 was already quite stable on the base system, and it's great to see this continued here. But I think most folks watching this video are interested in seeing how Xbox One X stacks up. So, using this same ranch as a testing point, I went in guns a-blazing in the most haphazard, least strategic fashion possible. Despite the massive increase in pixel count over other versions of the game, I'm happy to report that Xbox One X does a great job here. This entire sequence plays back without a hitch, always hitting its intended 30 frames per second, just as you would hope. I've put a decent chunk of time into the game on Xbox One X now, and this test is completely consistent with findings across the board. Each and every major firefight has maintained a solid 30 frames per second where it counts, and torn frames are extremely uncommon. At this point, it seems to run every bit as consistently or better than the PS4 Pro while offering a significant increase in pixel count. It's quite an impressive showing indeed. What's interesting is that throughout my time with this version, the only time I've run into noticeable screen tearing is on the map screen. Seriously, this is it. For some reason, the map screen on Xbox One X exhibits a lot of tearing. A very strange thing indeed, but really not an issue since it never actually impedes on gameplay. And no other console exhibits this problem either, I should note, including its younger brother, the base Xbox One. And speaking of Xbox One, I ran through a quick test on Xbox One S as well, and the results are noticeably worse than any other console version of the game. Now, it's still very playable, mind you, but the frame rate in this scene drops below 30 frames per second, while screen tearing rears its head. It's still a far cry from the last generation games, but it's not nearly as stable as every other console version of this game. Thankfully, most of these issues are tied to combat, and even then, not every battle. Exploration and lighter firefights tend to operate without a hitch. It's still a reasonably good experience on Xbox One, mind you, but in terms of playability, it's far behind the other versions. So at this point, it should be pretty clear that Ubisoft has done a good job of maximizing each platform's respective capabilities. All 4 versions offer a good experience, but Xbox One X owners clearly have access to the best console version of the game. The high resolution, stable frame rate, and excellent detail result in a truly beautiful game all around. That's not to say that PS4 Pro owners are left in the dust, of course. It's still a great looking game on Sony's machine, but it's just not as clear due to its lower resolution. But with that, we've reached the end of this video. Next week, Alex will be taking a closer look at the PC version of the game, so keep an eye out for that. And we'll be examining the recently released Doom patch, which promises increased resolutions on Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, so that's another thing to look forward to. For this video though, that's all for now. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us over on Twitter as always, and until next time, keep on farming.
I was born